The fortress of solitude, the glass walls of the 42nd floor penthouse reflected the Seattle skyline. But Marcus Blackwood saw none of its beauty. He stood at his home office window, phone pressed to his ear, discussing quarterly projections. While his 6-year-old son Jamie sat silently at the breakfast table, untouched cereal growing soggy in his bowl. "The Hartwell acquisition needs to close by Friday," Marcus said into his headset, his voice carrying the authority that had built his tech empire from nothing. Behind him, Jamie's small fingers traced patterns on the marble tabletop, lost in a world that seemed to exclude everyone else. Mrs. Patterson, the latest in a series of nannies, cleared her throat. "Mr. Blackwood, I really think we should discuss Jamie's progress." Or rather, Marcus held up a hand. Continuing his conversation about market penetration and profit margins, Mrs. Patterson's lips pressed into a thin line. She'd lasted 3 weeks, longer than most, but the writing was on the wall. The boy barely acknowledged her existence, and his father was too busy conquering the business world to notice his son was disappearing into himself. "I'll be resigning effective immediately," Mrs. Patterson announced the moment Marcus ended his call. "Jamie is a lovely child, but he needs more than I can provide. He needs ... She paused, gathering her coat. "He needs his father," Marcus watched her leave with the same detached efficiency he applied to everything else. Another problem to solve. Another position to fill. He glanced at Jamie, who had abandoned his breakfast and was now sitting on the floor, arranging his toy cars in perfect silent rows. The penthouse felt like a museum, mall clean lines, expensive art, and cold surfaces that echoed with loneliness. It had been Rebecca's design, back when laughter filled these rooms. Now it served as a monument to everything Marcus had lost 18 months ago, when cancer stole his wife and Jamie's mother. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "Interview at 2 p.m. Nina Torres. Art therapy background. Excellent references." Marcus barely looked up from his laptop as he typed back, "Make it brief. Standard requirements apply." By lunch, he'd forgotten about the appointment entirely, buried in acquisition contracts and board meeting preparations. The building's concierge called up at 2 o'clock sharp. "Send her up," Marcus said absently, not bothering to clear his desk or change from his casual Saturday attire of designer jeans and a black sweater. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus expected another Mrs. Patterson, gray-haired, stern-faced, armed with credentials and discipline charts. Instead, a woman in her late 20s stepped out, her dark hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. She wore a flowing purple dress and carried a canvas bag that looked like it had been painted by hand. "Mr. Blackwood?" Her voice carried warmth and a slight accent that reminded him of summer evenings. "I'm Nina Torres." Marcus shook her hand briefly, noting the paint stain on her thumb and the silver rings adorning her fingers. The position requires strict adherence to Jamie's schedule. Academic preparation, structured activities, proper nutrition, no television during weekdays, limited screen time on weekends. Nina's eyes wandered past him to where Jamie sat in his usual spot, methodically lining up toy cars by color and size. What does Jamie like to do for fun? The question caught Marcus off guard. Fun isn't the priority. He needs structure, discipline. His previous nanny was too lenient, I see. Nina walked over to Jamie, lowering herself to his level without invitation. "Those are beautiful cars, Jamie. I especially like the red one. It reminds me of a sunset." Jamie looked up for the first time that day, his dark eyes so much like his mother's meeting Nina's gaze for just a moment before returning to his cars. "The position pays well," Marcus continued, launching into his standard speech about expectations and boundaries. But Nina wasn't listening. She was watching Jamie, her expression soft with understanding. "When did he stop talking?" she asked quietly. Marcus's throat tightened. "He talks when necessary. It's not what I asked." Nina stood, facing him directly. "Children who organize everything are usually trying to control their world, because something important feels out of control. How long has it been since you heard him laugh?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd heard Jamie's laugh, that bright, infectious giggle that used to fill their home. The silence stretched, until Nina spoke again. "I'd like the job, Mr. Blackwood, but I need you to understand. don't just watch children. I help them heal. Cracks in the eyes. Nina arrived Monday morning carrying what looked like a small art studio in her canvas bags. Marcus watched from his office doorway as she spread supplies across his pristine dining table: watercolors, clay-colored pencils, and sheets of paper that seemed to glow against the marble surface. What is all this? Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tightening at the sight of potential mess in his organized world. Monday is painting day, Nina announced cheerfully, tying a small apron around Jamie's waist. The boy stood perfectly still, allowing her to prepare him like a mannequin. We're going to make handprint flowers. Absolutely not. Marcus moved to clear the table. Jamie has math worksheets scheduled for 9 a.m., followed by reading comprehension. His tutor expects his tutor can wait. Nina's voice remained gentle, but something steel-like entered her tone. When did you last see Jamie smile, Mr. Blackwood? Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The honest answer was too painful to voice. Nina knelt beside Jamie, who was staring at the array of colors with something that might have been curiosity. Want to help me make something beautiful? She whispered. For 3 days, Marcus tried to maintain control. He'd emerge from his office to find Nina and Jamie building blanket forts in the living room, or discover them in the kitchen, making what Nina called experimental pancakes, misshapen creations that somehow tasted like happiness. This isn't what I hired you for, Marcus protested Thursday morning, finding flower handprints on his granite countertops. No, Nina agreed, wiping Jamie's hands with a damp cloth. Oh, you hired me to keep Jamie quiet and out of your way. But that's not what he needs. The words stung because they rang true. Marcus had been treating his son like a problem to be managed rather than a child to be loved. But love felt dangerous now, too much like the crushing loss that had nearly destroyed him when Rebecca died. That afternoon, Marcus worked late in his downtown office, trying to avoid the chaos Nina brought to his carefully controlled world. When he returned home at 9 p.m., the penthouse was quiet again. It's quiet. He found Nina in Jamie's room, reading softly from a picture book about a dragon who learned to paint rainbows instead of breathing fire. Jamie was curled against her, sighed, his eyes heavy with approaching sleep. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his son's face, truly looking at it for the first time in months. The sharp angles of grief had softened slightly, and there was color in his cheeks that hadn't been there before Nina arrived. He painted this today, Nina whispered, pointing to a watercolor taped to the wall. Showed 3 stick figures holding. A hand's a tall one, a smaller one, and a medium-sized one with long dark hair. Marcus's chest tightened. Who's the third person? Why don't you ask him? Nina suggested gently. But Jamie had fallen asleep, his small hand still clutching a paintbrush. Later, after Nina had gone home to her own apartment, Marcus stood alone in his son's room. The walls, once bare, except for educational posters, now displayed a gallery of Jamie's artwork. Finger paintings of flowers, crayon drawings of dinosaurs, and that watercolor family that seemed to ask questions Marcus wasn't ready to answer. He pulled out his phone to call his assistant, tending to end this experiment before it went further. Nina was too disruptive, too unpredictable. She made him feel things he'd spent 18 months learning to suppress. Instead, found himself scrolling through his contacts until he reached Rebecca's number, still saved in his phone like a talisman against forgetting. If she were here, what would she say about Nina, about the way Jamie had started humming while he painted, or how he'd actually eaten an entire sandwich yesterday without being reminded? Rebecca had always believed in the healing power of art, of mess, of the beautiful, chaos that came with truly living. She would have loved watching Jamie discover colors again. Marcus put his phone away without making the call. Friday morning brought a new crisis. Jamie's private school principal called to discuss concerning behavioral changes. Apparently, Jamie had shared his crayons with another student and attempted to lead a drawing activity during free play. This isn't like him, the principal explained. Jamie has always been so ... contained. These outbursts of creativity are disruptive to his usual patterns. Marcus hung up, feeling caught between 2 worlds, the sterile perfection he'd built to protect himself from pain, and the messy, beautiful life Nina was coaxing back into existence. He found her and Jamie in the living room, where they'd constructed an elaborate city from couch cushions and were populating it with toy cars and action figures. "We need to talk," Marcus said. Nina looked up, paintbrush still in hand, and he saw something in her eyes that reminded him of Rebecca, that fierce protectiveness that came with loving someone completely. "Yes," she said quietly, "I think we do." Colors in the graphic conversation Marcus intended never happened. Instead, he found himself sitting cross-legged on his own Persian rug, helping Jamie arrange tiny wooden blocks into what Nina called the world's most important bridge. Bridges connect things that are far apart, Nina explained, her fingers gentle as she guided Jamie's small hands. "Sometimes people build walls when they're hurt, but bridges are much more useful." Marcus felt the metaphor settle uncomfortably in his chest. He'd built walls so high around himself that he'd forgotten what connection felt like. "Mr. Blackwood," Nina said softly, "Jamie asked me something yesterday that I couldn't answer." Marcus looked up from the blocks he'd been unconsciously arranging. "What did he ask?" "He wanted to know if you still love him?" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw a 6-year-old who had lost his mother, was slowly losing his father to grief and work. "Of course I love him," Marcus whispered. "I know that," Nina replied. "But when did you last tell him?" That evening, Marcus canceled his dinner meeting with investors, and instead he sat on Jamie's bed as Nina read another story, this one about a lighthouse keeper who learned that the brightest lights shine during the darkest storms. "Can I try?" Marcus asked when Nina finished. She handed him the book with a small smile. "Jamie, your daddy wants to read to you." Jamie's eyes widened with surprise, but he scooted closer to Marcus on the bed. Marcus's voice was rusty at first, unused to the gentle cadence of bedtime stories, but by the end of the chapter, Jamie had relaxed against his side. "Daddy." Jamie's voice was barely a whisper, the first word Marcus had heard him speak in weeks. "Yes, buddy. You going to read tomorrow too?" Marcus felt tears threaten, for the first time since Rebecca's funeral. "Every night if you want." "Me too." Jamie nodded solemnly, then looked toward Nina. "Will Miss Nina still paint with me?" "If your daddy says it's okay," Nina replied, her eyes meeting Marcus's over Jamie's head. "Miss Nina can paint with you as much as you want," Marcus said, meaning it completely. Over the following weeks, Nina transformed more than just Jamie's world. The penthouse, once a showcase of expensive emptiness, began to feel like a home. Children's laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent too long. Finger paintings appeared on the refrigerator. The formal dining room became a craft station where Nina taught Jamie and eventually Marcos to create beauty from nothing. But paper and paint? Marcus found himself leaving work earlier, drawn home by something he'd almost forgotten existed: joy. He discovered that Nina's warmth extended beyond her professional skills. She made coffee that tasted like comfort and had opinions about everything from abstract art to corporate responsibility that challenged his assumptions about the world. "Don't have to be perfect to be a good father," Nina told him one evening after Jamie had gone to bed. They were cleaning up the remains of an epic painting session, and Marcus was marveling at how normal chaos could feel beautiful. Rebecca made it look effortless, Marcus admitted, scrubbing purple paint from his hands. She knew how to be everything Jamie needed. She had her own struggles too, I'm sure. Nina dried a paintbrush with careful attention. "Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when you don't know what you're doing." Marcus paused, struck by the simple truth of her words. How do you know so much about healing?" Nina was quiet for a moment, her fingers still moving over the paintbrush. "I grew up with a father who worked himself to death trying to provide for us, and a mother who died when I was 12. I spent my teenage years raising my younger brother while my dad buried himself in his job. I learned that love isn't just about keeping someone safe, it's about helping them live." "Where's your brother now?" "Medical school in Portland. He sends me pictures of his study group sometimes." Nina smiled, but Marcus caught a shadow of loneliness in her expression. "Family isn't just about blood, you know. Sometimes you find your people in unexpected places." Their eyes met across the kitchen island, and Marcus felt something shift between them, a recognition of shared wounds and the possibility of shared healing. Later that night, Marcus stood in his home office, But instead of working, he found himself looking at the family portrait on his desk, himself, Rebecca, and a 3-year-old Jamie at the beach, all sun-kissed and laughing. For the first time since Rebecca's death, the photo didn't fill him with unbearable sadness. Instead, he felt grateful for the love they'd shared, hopeful that love like that could exist again. He could hear Nina moving quietly through the apartment, tidying up after their evening of creative chaos. She'd extended her hours without being asked, staying for dinner and bedtime stories, becoming part of their routine in ways that went far beyond her job description. Marcus realized, with startling clarity, that he was falling in love with his son's nanny, with her gentle strength, her ability to find light in darkness, and the way she'd brought his family back to life. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, it filled him with something he'd thought he'd lost forever. When worlds collide, the first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Marcus's phone rang at 5 a.m. His chief financial officer's voice was tight with urgency. "We have a problem. Someone's been buying up our stock quietly for months. They've got enough shares now to call for a board meeting." Marcus sat up in bed, instantly alert. Who? Donovan Industries. They're positioning for a hostile takeover. The name hit Marcus like ice water. Richard Donovan, his former business partner, the man who'd tried to steal Marcus's original software patents 15 years ago, is the same man who'd once called Marcus too emotional to run a real company. Within hours, Marcus's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Emergency board meetings, frantic calls with lawyers, stock prices fluctuating wildly as rumors spread through the tech community. Marcus found himself working 8-hour days, leaving before Jamie woke up and returning after he'd gone to bed. "You're disappearing again?" Nina said quietly on Thursday evening, finding Marcus hunched over his laptop at the kitchen counter. Jamie's latest painting, a cheerful family scene, lay forgotten beside his computer. "S is temporary," Marcus replied without looking up. "Once I save the company, what if you lose Jamie while you're saving it?" Marcus finally raised his head, seeing the concern in Nina's dark eyes. "You don't understand. If Donovan takes over, he'll dismantle everything. 5,000 employees will lose their jobs. Jamie's trust fund, his future." "Jamie doesn't need a trust fund," Nina interrupted. "He needs his father." But Marcus was already lost in another crisis call, watching his life's work slip away, while Donovan's lawyers found loopholes in contracts Marcus had thought were ironclad by Friday. The strain was showing. Marcus snapped at his assistant, canceled dinner with Jamie for the third night running, and barely acknowledged Nina when she tried to update him on his son's day. He was reverting to the man he'd been right after Rebecca's death, cold, distant, unreachable. "Daddy's sad again," he overheard Jamie whisper to Nina. As he grabbed his keys for another emergency meeting, the words stopped Marcus in his tracks. But his phone was already ringing with another crisis, and he forced himself to keep walking. Saturday morning brought devastating news. Donovan had found backing from a major investment firm and was accelerating his timeline. The hostile takeover would be announced Monday, with a board vote scheduled for the following week. "They're questioning your leadership capabilities, Marcus's," lawyer explained over speakerphone. "Donovan's claiming you're too emotionally compromised to run a major corporation. He's citing your domestic situation." Marcus's blood chilled. "What domestic situation? Your son's behavioral issues?" "Unconventional nanny. He's painting a picture of a man who's lost control of his personal life and therefore can't be trusted with shareholders' interests." Marcus looked through his office window toward the living room, where Nina was reading to Jamie. She'd brought him breakfast in bed that morning, something she'd never done before. And he realized she must have seen how close he was to breaking. That afternoon, private investigators hired by Donovan arrived at the building, asking neighbors questions about Marcus's fitness as a parent. By evening, tabloid photographers were stationed in the lobby, hoping to capture photos of the eccentric nanny, who was apparently evidence of Marcus's poor judgment. "This is insane," Nina said, pacing Marcus's office while Jamie napped. "They're using your love for your son against you." "Donovan knows exactly what he's doing." Marcus's voice was hollow. "He's always believed that caring about anything other than profit is weakness. And maybe he's right. Don't you dare. Nina stopped pacing and faced him directly. Don't you dare let him make you believe that loving Jamie is weakness. But Marcus was already retreating into himself, rebuilding the walls that Nina and Jamie had spent months dismantling. Maybe this was a mistake. All of it. I should have kept things professional, kept my distance. Jamie was fine before, Jamie was dying before, Nina said fiercely. He was disappearing piece by piece, and you were so busy protecting yourself that you couldn't see it. And now I'm going to lose everything anyway, Marcus shot back. My company, my son's future, everything I've built. You're not going to lose everything unless you give up. Nina, move. Building forever, Marcus spent Sunday morning sitting in his sterile home office, staring at contracts that seemed to blur together. Outside his window, Seattle's skyline stretched endlessly, but all he could see was the reflection of a man who had systematically destroyed everything that mattered. Jamie hadn't spoken since Nina left the night before. He'd simply nodded when Marcus explained that Miss Nina had to go help another family, and retreated to his room with the quiet acceptance of a child who'd learned not to expect permanence. By noon, Marcus couldn't stand the silence anymore. He found Jamie sitting on his bedroom floor, methodically putting away all the art supplies Nina had given him, folding each paintbrush and crayon into neat piles like he was packing away happiness itself. What are you doing, buddy? Miss Nina won't need these anymore, Jamie said, without looking up. I should put them away so they don't get messy. The words shattered something inside Marcus. His 6-year-old son was already learning to make himself smaller, to take up less space, to expect less from the world. Just like Marcus had taught him. Marcus knelt on the floor beside Jamie, his expensive suit crumpling against the carpet. What if I told you that Daddy made a big mistake? Jamie finally looked up, his dark eyes so much like Rebecca's filled with careful hope. Can you fix it? I don't know, Marcus admitted. But I want to try. Will you help me? 20 minutes later, Marcus was standing outside Nina's apartment building with Jamie's small hand in his, both of them clutching a painting Jamie had made that morning, bridge connecting to houses. With 3 figures holding hands in the middle, Nina answered her door in paint-stained clothes. Ow! Her eyes red-rimmed but fierce. Marcus, I meant what I said last night. I know you did, Marcus interrupted. Well, and you were right about everything. I chose fear over love, and I'm about to lose both the company and my son because of it. So what do you want from me? Marcus took a shaky breath. I want you to teach me how to fight for what matters. Not alone, but with family. Jamie stepped forward, holding up his painting. I made you a bridge, Miss Nina, so you can come home. Nina's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks as she knelt to Jamie's level. My sweetheart, I never really left. I've been right here, waiting. That evening, the 3 of them sat around Marcus's dining table, not planning corporate strategy, but plotting something far more important. Nina had called in favors from her network of artists and teachers, people who believed in fighting for what mattered. Jamie contributed his own insights with the startling clarity that children possess. Mr. Donovan sounds mean, Jamie said, coloring while the adults talked. Maybe he just needs someone to be nice to him. Sometimes being nice isn't enough, buddy, Marcus replied gently. But maybe being real is, Nina added thoughtfully. Marcus, what if instead of fighting Donovan on his terms, you showed the board who you really are? Not the corporate machine he's expecting, but the father and leader you've become. Monday morning's board meeting was unlike anything the corporate world had seen. Instead of arriving alone with his lawyers, Marcus walked into the gleaming conference room with Jamie and Nina beside him. Jamie carried his backpack full of art supplies, and Nina had her canvas bag slung over her shoulder like she was ready for anything. This is highly irregular, Donovan protested, his silver hair perfectly styled and his suit immaculate. This is a business meeting, not a daycare center. This is a meeting about leadership, Marcus replied calmly. I want the board to understand what kind of leader I've chosen to become. For the next hour, Marcus did something unprecedented in corporate America. He told the truth. He talked about losing Rebecca, about nearly losing Jamie to grief, and about learning that true strength came not from isolation, but from connection. He spoke about Nina's impact not just on his family, but on his leadership philosophy. How she taught him that sustainable success required investing in people, not just profits. 3 months ago, my son hadn't spoken in weeks, Marcus said, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of what he was risking. I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot to build a relationship with the person who mattered most. Nina didn't just save my son, she saved me from becoming the kind of man who wins everything but loses what makes winning worthwhile. Jamie, who had been quietly drawing during the presentations, suddenly stood up. "Mr. Donovan," he said in his clear, small voice, "my daddy works really hard, but now he also reads me stories and paints with me. It makes him a good daddy and a good boss." Several board members smiled despite themselves. Even Donovan's expression softened slightly. The vote was closer than anyone expected, 7-5 in favor of keeping Marcus as CEO, but it was enough. Later that evening, after the lawyers had gone home and the crisis had passed, Marcus found himself exactly where he wanted to be, sitting on his living room floor with Jamie and Nina, building a blanket fort that served no practical purpose except joy. "So what happens now?" Nina asked, adjusting a pillow that served as their fort's foundation. "Now we figure it out together," Marcus replied, pulling both Jamie and Nina closer. "All of it, company, this family, whatever comes next. Are we really a family now?" Jamie asked, looking between them with wonder. Marcus looked at Nina, seeing his future in her warm eyes and gentle smile. "If Miss Nina wants to be, then yes. We're really a family." Nina kissed Marcus softly, then pressed her forehead to his. "I've wanted to be part of this family since the day I met you both." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same penthouse that had once felt like a beautiful prison. But now it was filled with laughter, art covering every wall, and the happy chaos of a life fully lived. His company was thriving under his new leadership philosophy, one that valued both profit and people. Jamie was speaking in full sentences, telling elaborate stories, and had even made friends at his new, less rigid school. And Nina had become the bridge that connected all the best parts of Marcus's world. They'd married in a small ceremony in the penthouse, with Jamie as ring bearer, and the entire wedding party consisting of people who understood that the strongest families are built on love, not blood. As Marcus tucked Jamie into bed that night, his son looked up at him with eyes full of trust and joy. "Daddy," Jamie said sleepily, "I'm glad you learned how to build bridges." Marcus smiled, thinking of all the walls he'd torn down and all the connections he'd chosen to make. "Me too, buddy. Me too." Outside, Seattle sparkled in the darkness. But inside their home, the light was warmer and brighter than any cityscape, the light of a family who'd found each other and chosen to stay.